Question.
Yeah?
Do you remember in class when we went over Russia?
Sort of. What about it?
I was trying to remember how exactly Stalin transformed the Soviet Union into a totalitarian state.
Well, I think Stalin will put it like this.
Hello, I'm Stalin. Joseph Stalin. And this is Valdemar Lenin. This is Kemnev. And this is Duck Heron. And that all the way over enemy. These are some people of Russia, along with some Bolsheviks. And these are the top hats that make the most important people of society, such as lawyers and bankers and yada yada. These are my children. And these are the peasants. And this is Tsar Nicholas III. Okay, well, let's start on my story about how I led Russia to greatness. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia was started by millions of people, along with Lenin's Bolshevik and other known communists. So when the provisional government refused to distribute the land and food fairly, they decided that it would be best to take matters into their own hands and overthrow the provisional government and take charge. The Bolsheviks tried to educate the workers, convincing them to seize power and land for themselves. Lenin went into hiding after July 1917, when the provisional government overpowered them. Two good things did happen even after everything looked so horrible. First, in late August, the soldiers of the provisional government began to fall apart and break away from the party, and slowly began to support the workers, and soon they found themselves as part of the Bolshevik Party. Second, now that the Bolshevik workers have united, it made it possible for them to fight against the military, therefore making it possible for them to win important elections. In early October, Lenin convinced the Bolshevik Party to form against the provisional government, the armed workers known as the Red Guard, and the other revolutionary groups moved under the orders of the Soviet Revolutionary Committee. These forces seized everything, from telegraph offices to railroad stations to the state bank. Oops. Once the shot rang out from the battleship of Aurora, the thousands of people in the Red Guard stormed into the Winter Palace. The provisional government officially fell into the Bolshevik regiment. Once the word came to the rest of the people that the Winter Palace had been taken, people from all over rose and filled it with Vladimir Lenin, the leader of Bolsheviks, and announced his attempt to construct the socialist order in Russia. This new government, made up of Soviets, was led by Bolsheviks. By early November, there was little doubt that the proletarians backed the Bolshevik motto, "All power to the Soviets!" Go. During Lenin's time in power, he worked to reconstruct the economy and society of Russia. Russia's society and its economy became consistent with communism. All the large industries were put under government control, and the economy became socialist. Eventually, when the economy began to get worse, Lenin brought back some aspects of capitalism through this new economic policy. After almost a year bedridden, Lenin died of a heart attack on the 21st of January. Lenin did not leave any precise indication of who will be his successor, but he led a set of critical comments on leading Bolshevik colleges. His main criticism was against me. In Lenin's testament, he warned them against my character and that I should be removed from office. I, along with other politicians, Kamenev and Zinoviev, formed what was offered as the Troika, or the Triumvirate. And as Lenin inched closer to his death, they launched a series of attacks on Trotsky, as he seemed to hold the most powerful position. The testament was never made public, as Trotsky and the Triumvirate agreed to keep silent. This, however, caused a 4-year power struggle. 1924 marked the start of my rise to power. I was one out of 7 members of the Politburo, and by 1930 I would overshadow them, and by 1940 outlive them all. My success can be mostly because of my political geniuses and my mistakes made by my rivals. My opponents were primarily men of theory, Marxists rather than men of action. However, I was not much of a Marxist and was willing to twist it to my advantage to get rid of my so-called comrades. In 1921, a solution was passed banning all groups within the party from putting forward ideas that disagreed with the official party policy. This was known as the ban of factionalism. Those against the revolution would be expelled from the party, and this would result in a lack of debate within the party, which benefited me. At first, communists didn't believe in bureaucracy, but being that the government was so complicated, it forced the party to become more centralized. So, of course, guess who the party appointed as General Secretary to organize matters. Yeah, that's right, me. So by 1933, there were 3.5 million members. Most were young and inexperienced, which made them easier to influence compared to older members. There was no clear leader to who it was between. Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenev, Buchanan, and of course, me. Trotsky was my biggest opponent, but Trotsky refused to compete for leadership. For example, he made an excuse that he missed Lenin's funeral because I gave him the wrong date. This just comes to show his lack of political will to fight, leaving the coast cleared in May. Trotsky was soon exiled to Turkey with 1 down and 3 to go. My own political skills helped me get to power by shifting alliances, using the secret police, and putting my people in key jobs, hoping there'd be any opposition. Go. The Russian farming was backward and inefficient. Millions of tiny peasants were forcibly gathered or collected into large state-run farms. The surplus was either sold abroad to buy machines for modern farming and for industries in the cities needed for industrial growth. I believe that the Soviet agriculture needed to be modernized because the machines and methods were too old.
No.
The dispossessed peasants were to be moved to cities and work in new factories. This made the poor peasants happy because they had steady jobs and wages, but the rich farmers, other known as the kulaks, rebelled and began to set their crops on fire and killed their livestock before they became state property. This, of course, displeased me, so I needed to teach them a lesson by killing them off or sending them to slave labor camps, to the gulags. Go. The Soviet Union was about 50 to 100 years behind the rest of the modernized world. This meant weakness and vulnerability. As the fear of Nazi increased, we needed to make some changes. So the main areas of focus were heavy and important industries like coal, oil, and steel. Each industry was examined and given specific targets to meet. Factories, dams, power stations, and the whole new cities were built. There were also harsh penalties for failure to meet targets and some rewards for success. But the targets were unrealistic and rarely met. But despite terrible human cost, massive industrial growth in a very short amount of time, results. USSR becomes world's second industrial power with no unemployment.
Go.
I used purges and show trials to establish my power and get rid of opposition. In 1937, I started the Great Purge, which was a campaign of terror that eliminated anyone who threatened my power. I used my secret police to get rid of anyone who was against me, and we would either execute them or force them to go to the gulags.
Go.
When beloved Kirillov, a member of the Politburo, was murdered on December 1934, I accused Kamenev and Zinoviev of involvement and imprisoned them. In 1937, I accused Kamenev, Zinoviev, Buchanan, and 14 others, along with Trotsky, of plotting to overthrow the government. This trial for treason was the first show trial which began the Great Terror of 1936 to 1938. Propaganda was used to make me look powerful and good to my people. These images were shown everywhere. I was credited for all achievement and success, as I wanted to build up my profile as a rightful successor to Lenin. I carefully created the impression that I was a genius, describing myself as the wisest man of the 20th century, or the genius of the age. The Soviet people were told and taught that I was never wrong. This was never wrong. This got rid of any challenges. I made sure everyone knew about my success. Huge rallies were held in my honor. I wanted love and worship. Many forms of propaganda were used to pass on the news, my favorite being paintings and sculptures that appeared all over Russia.
And everything was cool. But when the rich people started eating all of the food, we peasants got upset and we started to brood. All we want is peace, land and bread. Everybody sing! Peace, land and bread. A little louder now. We gathered together, the people all said, peace, land and bread.
Hey, how would you like it if you had to wait in line an hour for a potato? Yeah, and it's another line for butter and sour cream.
That's what Vladimir Lenin called back up the scene. He said,
Exploiting the poor is really, really mean.
with his buddy Trotsky, they started a plot scheme to overthrow the Tsar.
Go ahead, Trotsky.
My career is Shotsky. All we want
for working class and begin 30-year communist regime.
Right. Listen, you mind if I get my potato first? Lenin's group was called the Bolsheviks. The country's problems they vowed to fix. Told the workers and the peasants they'd lead the way to a Russia where there'd be food every day. In 1917, the revolution began. The Tsar gave in and threw up his hands as Lenin removed the crown from his head. He said,
Oh, this'll buy a lot of peace, land, and bread.
"Hey, peace, land, and bread.
Everybody,
Peace, land, and bread.
listen to the peoples now.
We're sick of war. It makes everyone dead.
Peace, land, and bread."
Vladimir Lenin, what made you decide to finally take over Russia? Well, I decided it was time to quit Stalin. Get it? Stalin!
Peace, land, and bread.
Oppressed people sing.
Peace, land, and bread.
Just the ladies.
I just want to feed my children and put them to bed.
Peace, land, and bread.
The poor rulers sing.
Peace, land, and bread.
Everybody!
Peace, land, and bread.
Cha cha cha!
So yeah, that was my story on Russia. Oh, okay. Did you get all of that? Give or take. Okay, well, I was hoping you'd pay attention because we're testing on it next week. Oh, okay, well, yeah, I got it. Sure, Russia, yeah. Peace, land, bread. Okay,